I'm Tom McMillan. Join me as I interview professional sports people on their journeys making it pro. I'm on a mission to explore the mental strength and dedication required to make it in professional sport. If you like what I'm doing, please remember to like, subscribe, and leave a comment below. Hope you enjoy the episode. Right, Paul, that's us on. Welcome to Making It Pro, and thanks for giving us your time. So what I'll do is I'll fire straight into the questions, and we'll just go through stage by stage some of the experiences you had in your career yourself, Paul. So if you can tell me, what was the earliest memory, earliest recollection you've got, Paul, for kicking a ball as a kid?
Memory evades me now, Tom. I'm that old, but many years ago, probably since I was 2 or 3, always kicking something about the house, or out in the front, or out in the front. I'm going to say a garden, but it wasn't a garden actually. It was a road. Playing keepy uppy on the road, but just knocking balls about and knocking whatever about, anything you could kick, pillows, cushions, whatever was at your feet.
Sisters.
You'd be rattling about in the house. So as far back as my memory serves me, to be honest.
Aye. And did you have an instant love for it, Paul?
An instant love for football?
Aye. And just kicking a ball and...
I've got no idea where that came from, Tommy. I think it's just something that's inside you. And probably when I look at my own son and how natural it was for him just to see something and go and kick it about. So probably if you go back 50 years, that's exactly how I was when I was a kid. Anything that was there to be kicked about, I would be desperate to go and do it, and scoring a goal. That's what it was about. It was about putting it in between the table legs, or putting it in between the legs of the chair, to celebrate the fact you just scored a goal in the living room.
And see that, Paul, did that, again, obviously, we're a similar age, and there's certain key points in football that bring about memories for you watching football. But, there's a thing, at a young age, just the desire and the sheer pleasure for scoring a goal. And as you say, if it's between a table legs or chair legs or something, it's there. And obviously that was a position that went on to be relevant to you because you played in an attacking position. But just the sheer joy of scoring a goal, that's what struck you.
Oh, absolutely. That feeling, I don't think that feeling ever leaves you, regardless of what age you are. Just the euphoric moment of the ball hitting the net. Even as an old guy, if I'm kicking the ball about the pitch, I'd hope one time maybe the manager's having a look, and I think to myself, I've got a chance here.
I've still got 55. And I mean, obviously, just to touch on your own son Oliver's playing professional football, and do you see similarities in Oliver when he was away in that desire? Because again, he plays in a forward, he plays as an out-and-out striker, but you seen in him as a wee fella just that desire to score a goal as well?
That's what he was about. He was about scoring goals predominantly, and that's hitting the back of the net was what he wanted to do constantly. And similarities, his obsession with football. It was an obsession and is an obsession.
Yeah.
Obsession to be out in the garden. As soon as you come in from school, you're out there and you've got the strip on. He's got a warm-up top on. He takes a warm-up top off to start the game. It's just, as I say, I think these things are just inside you.
Absolutely. I mean, that's, it can be bred through in generations, and obviously, the first professional footballer or ex-professional footballer whose sons then went on to play professionally as well. But obviously that brings a different pressure for yourself, because first of all and first and foremost, you're a parent, and the parent and the love for your child for whatever, I know myself, the love for your own child to be happy and successful in whatever they're doing is there. But obviously the feeling of following in your footsteps into professional football brings a different stress, because you try and advise as a parent, but also you're a professional coach. So that must be a challenge for you.
As a challenge, and as you say, you try not to be overbearing with it. It was difficult. He was in my environment when I was at Kilmarnock, and probably I couldn't treat him really as a son. He was just another number, and probably didn't get as much encouragement as I would have probably gave anybody else sometimes for doing well. It would just be a kind of passing remark just because he was my son. So that side of it was difficult. Now it's far better now, and he gets to express himself as himself now instead of being my son. Which is really good for him. What I generally advise him of is enjoy the good moments, because there's tons of bad ones. So when you're on a high, enjoy it, milk it, and have a good time with it. Because round the corner, or the next game, or the next 2 or 3 weeks, you're going to be facing disappointments and challenges again.
Did you feel that, Paul, yourself? Obviously it's great because you've been there and been able to pass that experience and knowledge on to your own son, and also the players you coach. A lot of players will talk about, and you might feel like yourself that they're not able to reflect on the high moments till their career's finished, or certainly in the latter stages of their playing career. But did you feel like, through your own time as a player, were you able to embrace and enjoy the high moments while they were happening, or was it not until later in your life that you've been able to look back and maybe embrace them more?
No, I think probably in terms of the level you play at, if you play at a big club who's challenging, then you will have more high times than not, I would assume. The success I had was relative to the level that I was playing at. And we had a decent squad, decent team. We enjoyed it. I enjoyed the victories. Probably it would be a kind of 60-40, 70-30 in terms of victories to losses. And the earlier days at Accies, when I was coming through, we kind of jumped between the Championship as it is now and the Premier League. So probably didn't appreciate as much then as really now what it meant to get promoted to the Premier League, to be honest. I think when you're young, you think that's just a norm. Also, on the flip side, you don't really realise the impact that relegation has. As a player, again, you're selfish. You're just thinking, we've been relegated and we'll try and bounce back next year again, or I'll find a new club. So it's not until you get into the other side of the game that you realise the ramifications of both, in a positive and a negative.
For the club, for the fans,
everybody associated with the clubs.
And so, getting back to just what you were saying there, obviously in reference to you and Oliver, but for your own basis, like when you go back and think of your early stages in football, did you have any outside influence, be it a parent or specific coaches, friends? Was there anybody that started to sort of have an influence on you as a very young player when you were joining a team, and some of the goals that you had at that early stage?
I think your mum and dad are always influences for you, but from a football perspective, the first real influence for me would have been at primary school, and it was a headmaster called Mr. McConaughey, who came to be the headmaster at our primary at Cathedral. And he was a football-orientated guy and wanted his school team to be successful. And quite quickly, he took a wee shine to myself. And we ended up being relatively successful. I think we won most of the cups that were up for grabs at that time. And he was forever promoting it. And he would be allowing you to come out of class, to walk around all the classes, to show all the classes the cups that you had just won. So it really meant something to him. So that he was probably the earliest in terms of realising that maybe had a wee bit of potential, that could maybe make a wee mark in the game somewhere. So that was at primary school, probably primary 5 or so, primary 6. And then it was a guy called Bert McShane. Bert was a local kind of boys club manager. he was out to establish a team, to create a team, and he came to my door and asked me if I would join his team. Again, I think I was probably only about 10 or 11 at the time, and formed a relationship with Bert from under 11s to, I left them, believe it or not, at under 18s at Mary Street Boys Club, and he was a brilliant support for me in terms of getting me about to trials, etc., at clubs that I had to go to that showed an interest. Bert would be at the door with the car, right, come on, let's go, and we would go to Dundee and we go to Hibs, and we're all over the place. So he was a brilliant support for me.
And even, like, obviously, you know, you take for the school experience, Paul, which is great. You know, a lot of people maybe could be at a school where, you know, the teachers or headmaster could be the complete opposite. But when you were saying that, one of the other things that really struck me is that the benefit that is to other prospective younger or players surrounding, even at the same age, that would maybe have an inclination to want to play football. And obviously now when you look at the success of women's football, and primarily, obviously, that's been highlighted with England's success at the Euros there. But, you know, that's a great thing to hear, because for a teacher to sort of enthuse the whole school about the success of the school, about the success of the football team, you know, for so many kids that might not be specifically academic and can feel a failure at school or feel that they're not succeeding in the specific purposes that school is laid out to provide for us. You know, we're all this mindset that that's what school's for, is for your academics. But there's the relationship that you had with that headmaster, but also the relationship he had with the school as a whole, because he promoted and did celebrate the success of the school football team. I mean, that's brilliant, because it, you know, for yourself, I mean, that must have made you feel an integral part of the school as a body as well.
I think absolutely. I think that made my time at school, what would I say, tolerable. Because you touch on the academic side of things. I was never academic at school at all. All I wanted to do was waiting the bell going at playtime so I could go out in the yard and play football. And he embraced that, to be fair to him, Mr. McCondicky, and did, and gave me a lot of self-belief. And as I say, made the school tolerable for me, because, as I say, I wasn't at all greatly academic. But I went to school primarily to play for the school team, who would have a midweek game, so that we would get out of school at 1 o'clock to go and travel to a game. So that was the highlight of the week for me.
And I bet, I mean, that'll resonate with so many other footballers then and through our time, and also footballers and now, a lot of young players that obviously you're having the luxury, you coached at Kilmarnock, and also you're doing it at Partick Thistle, but a lot of players will feel the same. But again, that bond, you know, I think more and more, even in the academic side, that education systems are understanding that kids can be intelligent without being academic. And that's, you know, you take your role now and some of the young lives, you know, that are in your hands and trying to help develop young players. Well, without having intelligence, you wouldn't be able to do that role. That's not just about being able to kick a ball. So that's great to hear. And so you went through and you joined Mary Street Boys Club around the age of 10 and 11. How did it feel then? You know, obviously you're part of the school team and part of the school structure, but to then have somebody come to your door, you know, and saying to your parents and saying to yourself, we'd like to invite Paul to come and play with us. Like, did you feel then you could start feeling a special element to who you were as a player?
Yeah, of course. Well, obviously that builds on from your playing time within the school system, the school team. You get relative success here, you score a lot of goals, so you become kind of locally. And at that time, they used to put the wee reports in the local paper, which would have been the Motherwell Times at the time. So each week the Motherwell Times would come out on a Wednesday night or a Thursday, and you'd run to the shop. My dad primarily would run to the shop and come in, and he would be looking through the wee results, and then you'd see your name in bold. Scored a goal, scored 2 goals, however many goals. So I managed to score quite a number of goals that obviously attracted Bertie to come and approach me to come and play for his team. So from that early age, to be wanted is always makes you feel good. Of course it does, to be wanted by somebody to come and be part of their organisation or team is every bit as good then as it is now when you get asked to come and take a job. So it's the exact same feeling to feel part of it.
I think that's a great point, Paul. You know, when you take any player's career, and even as you move up the ranks, and you did yourself, and you move to tougher challenges. I saw Stephen Cocker making a comment last week, and I don't know if you'd seen it on LinkedIn, and he was saying there's 25 a squad, and there's only 11 players, and I've been part of that 11, and I've been part of the 14 that's left out. And the psychological impact in that. And I think in anything in life, we all want to feel, my wee mammy, God rest her, used to say to us, we all need to be needed. And I think, obviously, that's regardless of whether it's, a Mary Street Boys Club, whether it's at Hamilton, whether it's at, Liverpool or Barcelona, or whatever it is. I think that feeling within an individual player of knowing that they're in the group, that they're wanted, that they can make a contribution, I think that psychological impact is still as uplifting, and it's still as deflating if you're in that 11 or if you're in that 14 that's left aside. So I think it's, again, you can take a lot for the feeling of wanted by the school team, wanted by Mary Street Boys Club, and it's a positive feeling as you start to take the steps through football yourself at a young age.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And as I say, to feel wanted plays such an important role in terms of your self-motivation, your self-belief, your self-confidence. And like Stephen Cocker, I've been in the 11, and I've been in the 14, and I've been in the 25. And I know where I prefer to be and where makes me feel best. But it's, as you say, experience allows you to deal with those situations.
And through the early stages, Paul, playing for the school and playing for, obviously, the likes of Mary Street, were you generally playing? I mean, obviously, I know, we know each other, and I remember you in these days. I remember even, I'm just slightly younger than you, but even when we used to play in the ash pitch round the corner from where you lived, like a lot of us as younger players sort of looked up to you because I could see even at a very young age the extra talent you had. And if they were picking teams to play, as we called it at Wembley down at Calder, or playing in the ash, you would be I would be yearning, I hope I was in your team or whatever, because you knew single-handedly you could win a game at that level. And obviously, as you played in boys club level, you could single-handedly win a game. But, you always felt included, and you were generally always starting and playing in the days, eh?
Yeah, no, I was, fortunately enough. But as you say, the longer your journey goes, the more challenges and obstacles come in your way. Different opinions. People take to you as a player, don't take to you as a player. So there are loads of challenges thereafter. But the feeling of being part of the group and being one of the main players in the group makes you feel valued, and that's really important. That everybody within your group does feel valued. I think that's a massive message.
I think that's, we can pick out various clubs, but we'll talk about Scottish football before we come on air. And one of the things that's becoming very apparent with Ange Postecoglou, with his group at Celtic, is that he's making the changes that he's making. And you can see that when players come in, it's as if they've been playing week in, week out. I saw it in Anthony Ralston at the weekend. And you can see the success that he's managing to achieve, where that feeling of inclusion is still there, whether you're in the starting 11 or not, which obviously, as a coach, is not an easy feat.
No, you're right. The easiest players to manage are the 11 that's playing in the games. the ones that are not playing are the challenges to manage, and it takes a certain individual, and that's why I think probably as a manager, and I've never been a manager before, but I think that's why your assistant manager becomes the key person within your kind of team group there, or coaching staff there, because he's the one that really tends to manage the boys who are not getting the games and manage the disappointment, and he plays a huge role in terms of the welfare of the players, and I think that's a really key position within your club.
And so when you obviously that success at Mary Street, Paul, what was the next step for you, the next step up?
Well, I just went to Mary Street from primary school, and that year I was going to secondary school, to a ladies' high, and we had trials to get in the school team. So trials would be in a Monday afternoon after school, and we'd be at the Watsonville Park, which is now a big Astor. And the teacher at that time was a PE teacher called Mr. Galloway, Peter Galloway. And he would be kind of refereeing the game, picking the teams, and we would just be playing, and he would be having a wee look about. And he came up to me during one of the games, and he says, you were at Cathedral last year, weren't you? You scored quite a lot of goals last year. I says, I did. And I knew how many goals I'd scored, so I wasn't shy in telling him that. Again, desperation to try and get into the school team. So successful there, managed to get into the school team and be part of that group at a ladies' high. And again, that was now football sorted for a Saturday, because we would be playing a Saturday morning at Watsonville mainly. And then the Saturday afternoon, after grabbing a quick ice bun out of Crawford's at the time, I would make my way onto the Mary Street game in the afternoon. So sports science at that time was in its infancy, should we say.
Definitely. Do you know, it's funny, Paul, as well, though, see, when you think on that and you hear players saying, I mean, obviously it's more physically demanding in the sense that if you're playing at upper professional levels, but when you hear players saying, we've played too many games, obviously coming up to the World Cup, that impact has been there. Teams are squeezing games in sort of 2 and 3 a week. But when you think as a kid, you were so desperate to play, you'd have played 3 a day. I mean, I remember playing actually for a school team in the morning. I played an amateur match in the afternoon, and somebody phoned to see if I'd play 5-a-sides at night. And not even getting it a thought. I was just desperate to play, So you would go like that, playing 2 games. And obviously you were successful. I mean, our ladies had a very successful team and have continued to have that through generations. But it wasn't light-hearted football you were playing. You were playing at a high standard even at that stage, eh?
As I say, we were a decent team with a decent group of players within that, and we had, again, relative success. I'm just trying to think at that time. I'm not sure if we did play for cups until probably later on in the kind of school year groups. But we did eventually win the equivalent to the Scottish Cup. And Peter Galloway at that time was the coach of the school team. So it was a massive reward for him for his time and effort that he put in on a voluntary basis, probably taking the school team.
And seeing in that time, obviously within the school, but Lanarkshire is not a small area by any stretch of imagination. But again, that must have started to draw attraction to not just yourself, but the group of players having achieved success at school level and the success you were achieving at boys' club. So at what age, Paul, and what stage was their first interest for a professional club in yourself?
Just after first year at school, I think I was turning about 13, and we had another teacher at school called Phil McGee. Phil was one of the staff teachers who I didn't really know at the time, but Phil was kind of connected to Motherwell. And I think Phil had dropped my name in to maybe one of the scouts or one of the coaches at Motherwell. And I got a visit one day from Davy Hay, who was the first team manager. Actually came to my house, chapped the door, And my mum was affronted because obviously the house hadn't been swept up or hoovered or anything. So in comes Davy Hay. To my amazement, I was a massive Motherwell fan at the time. And for the Motherwell manager to walk through the front door was like unbelievable.
How did you feel with that, Paul? I mean, I know that I've heard players talking about Alex Ferguson, David Beckham referring to him doing the same thing, but for that scale, for the first team manager to turn up your door, how did you feel?
Well, as you say, it's something that doesn't happen very often. For a first team manager to come to a wee scrawny 13-year-old's house to ask him to sign an S for him at his club was like a dream. It was like a dream at that time. And as I say, looking back at it, you don't appreciate it at the time, the enormity of it. And the fact that Davy Hay took the time out of his day dealing with his first team things that he had to do, that he comes to my house in the afternoon or later on that day. It was amazing.
Aye, I had a great joy. I knew Davy, and he was such a personable man as well. That it says volumes about who he was to go out his way to do that. But again, I suppose as a coach now as well, that memory still sticks with you. I would imagine when you're dealing with players yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. And to be fair, throughout obviously my coaching career, I've had examples of that happening with various managers, none more so than the gaffer just now, Ian McCall. The gaffer always makes time to come in, comes to the games to watch the young players, hail, rain or shine, get a keen interest in them, and makes time to come in and speak to them also. Again, that's a massive thing for any young player that's within your system, to know that the manager knows you first and foremost. Is huge. As I say, I've had examples of that through my coaching career as well. Various managers, Kenny Shields was brilliant at Kilmarnock at doing it. I think I had great relationships with most of the managers, or if not all of the managers that I've worked under. And that's the key about them. They're all they are mostly personable guys.
Yeah. And I think that's very relative in sport, professional sport. But again, it goes back to that need to be needed. I think where you don't feel overlooked. Obviously, as you mentioned earlier, the challenges start to become slightly tougher and you start to move up the scale. And so, where you're maybe in a group of players at 10, 15, and you are the star, it's when they start to collect all those stars for that region and put them into one group of players. And that's where, obviously, at the heart of what we're doing here and what it is I'm trying to sort of really look at in closeness is then when you get 10, 15, 20 real quality individuals, then that step up, it's not just you step up as an individual, but the environment becomes much tougher. So when you went into Motherwell, how did you feel then? Did it feel better playing with better players, or were you aware of this is going to be a tougher test?
Well, I think quite quickly I became aware that it's going to be a challenge. At that time, the academy systems weren't the way they are just now. They were nowhere near as developed. So we would have a group of players that would come to Fir Park and train on a Tuesday night, and we'd be training over in the kind of big ash park, just behind the terrace and at Now Top.
Yeah.
And you would be training with guys of all ages. Joe Wark would be training with us. Joe Wark was a Motherwell captain.
Yeah.
He would be training there. Brian McClare would be training there.
What age were you then, Paul?
I'd be 13, 14 at the time.
Bloody hell.
13, 14. And as I say, at that time, there was no real structure about young players. It was just a case of you would sign an S for them and you would then be attached to the club. It started to evolve a wee bit. We'd create the youth coach that came in at the time, I think, was a guy called Alistair Stevenson. And they would create teams to go and play games. That was the first experience of playing games. And at that time, it struck me that I'm not going to be the best player here. I'm not going to be the one that's going to stand out, not for the want of trying, but just, as you just alluded to, they're bringing all of the best Lanarkshire talent and outside talent together. And there was players at that time way more coveted than I was, and way more rated than I was. So that is challenges.
Did you feel, Paul, that was... Did you naturally rise to the challenge of that mentally and physically, or did you at times, did you find it in any way intimidating?
Well, again, we spoke earlier about feeling part of it. For some reason at that time, I didn't feel as though I was an important part of it. I just felt as though I was there at the time. As I say, there were more coveted players than me, and players who were more highly rated than I was, with the staff at the club at the time. And I don't mean the senior staff. I mean round about youth level.
Yeah.
And I don't know, possibly size may well have played a part at that time also, because I wasn't the biggest of players. I wasn't well built, but I was quick. But as I say, that's when the challenge started really for me, both mentally, physically, and in terms of performance-wise. Because as I say, I was a Motherwell fan. My dream was to play for Motherwell. I'd go to all of the games. I'd be sneaking in the games at Now Top. I'd be getting a lift over from the Fir Park club. When I signed my S form, Davy Hay gave me a season book, and that was like best present you could get.
And there's a couple of different additions, and obviously, as you say, the first team training beside you, which, you know, for a lot of players can be you can catch on to their coattails and you can see that it's available to you. But even something like, you know, again, you touched on there getting lifted over, which I used to get with my dad myself, getting lifted on the terrace, the turnstiles, so because you weren't paying for wains. And I actually saw somebody commenting on that recently, and specifically at Fir Park, a mutual friend of both of us, Tam Cowan, and Tam was saying, you know, when you see acres of space in some stadiums, would it not be of benefit to the club to just allow the wains still to get lifted over and fill the stadium with fans? I mean, there was you know, no less a fan then at that age than maybe a middle-aged man that was a season ticket holder. So obviously, you know, at that time, as far as I can recall, you were still playing with Mary Street, even although you were training with Motherwell. Is that right?
That's right. I still played with my boys' club because that's where I belonged. That's where I felt part of it. I would then go on the Tuesday night to Motherwell and train there with the group that they had assembled from, as I say, boys from various areas. They then asked us to join what was Fir Park Boys Club at that time.
Yeah.
And I was reluctant to do so because I was really comfortable at my boys' club. And I don't know if that may well have affected my opportunities thereafter. But I chose to stay at Mary Street. A couple of the lads, one in particular, a guy called James Ahare, Junior Ahare. Junior was, at that time, rated as one of the best players in Lanarkshire, for example.
Yeah.
And we both played at Mary Street Boys Club, but Junior decided to go to Fir Park Boys Club, and I decided to stay at Mary Street. And as I say, Junior was the kind of captain of the team at Mary Street. Lovely footballer at that time as well. And as I say, that decision came about that they wanted to try and attach you to the club via their local boys club.
It's an interesting point, that, Paul, because I've spoken to you in the past about how it is here in Spain, where they tend not to attach the kids to a club till the later stages now, 15, 16. And one of the main reasons I think behind it is to allow the players, you know, I always use the term, I'm speaking to my own son, Maddox, and obviously, you know, we've been friends a long time, and the likes of, I've used the word even when I've been speaking to Oliver myself, but I always say to our Maddox, getting into a testing situation, if he knows maybe a scout's going to be there or a scout's came to watch him, remember to express yourself. don't play within yourself. You know, I always feel personally when you talk to young players, getting that opportunity to express yourself can be difficult when you know you're in a pressured situation. And when you look at some of the academies, there has been a feeling for a long time where players start to play safe and they play within systems and they don't develop that self-expression, which is quite evident from the way that you're speaking. You felt really comfortable at Mary Street, that you knew you could express yourself because you knew it was your comfort zone, you were secure in that. But again, is that a thing that, were you conscious of that as a young player, or was it just an emotion that you knew you belonged there so you could play with a complete freedom and flexibility to really express yourself when you played with Mary Street?
Yeah, well, I think probably I'd been at Motherwell for maybe 15, 16 months at the time. And it's probably occurring to me that I'm not quite fitting in there as well as I fitted in with my boys' club. And then to then leave my boys' club to then try to fit in at another team, which would have been Fir Park Boys Club.
Yeah.
At that time, it just didn't appeal to me to do that. I preferred where I was, and the option was that you can go and play with your boys' club, which is fine. But thereafter, quite quickly after that, I get released at Motherwell. I get released as from the S Forum, and the reason at that time was for being too small.
What age were you then, Paul?
I'd have been 15 probably, just turning 15. I get took into, it was after training, get took into an office with the youth development guy, Alistair Stevenson, who's now an academy director at St Johnstone, and a colleague who I meet really often in the same line of business we're in now. But at that time, as I say, no parents. We just took in after training and advised that, listen, we don't think you're going to make it here. We feel you're a wee bit small. It's maybe better you go back and just play with your club, your boys' club. So I ran home that night, having been released from Motherwell as an S Forum.
How did that hit you, Paul?
At that time, Tommy, that probably hit me like a ton of bricks.
Yeah.
Because one, I had been released at the club that I was supporting and wanted to probably play for.
Yeah.
Two, that I'd lost my season ticket also because I wouldn't be getting into the games again. And then I had to go and tell my mum and dad that I'd just been released. So it was a huge knock at that time. Huge.
And how did they react, Paul, as far as, you know, obviously the reaction to you and what you needed at that time emotionally as a very young player?
I think parents at that time didn't really get involved as they are now.
Yeah.
So it was just like one of the things. Oh, they'll be fine. You'll prove them wrong. Something better will come. It wasn't a huge issue for my mum and dad. Outwardly, probably inwardly, they would be feeling disappointed for me, but they certainly they didn't show that in any great way. It was just a case of, well, better things will come.
And did you find that helped you deal with it? The fact that they didn't make a big deal of it?
I probably did. Where it probably hit me most was the fact that I was now going back to my boys' club to play on a Saturday now with Bertie and the other lads, and I had been rejected at 15, and that took a while to go over in terms of having to handle the rejection.
Yeah.
At that time.
And did you find? I mean, obviously you've spoke before about the sort of mentorship and the support that you got for Bertie, and did he have a massive impact in lifting you up again after that disappointment?
Yeah, he did. He had a huge impact in that because I was going back to it again, just to an environment where I felt comfortable. I was one of the main players, but for a period of time, my form and my desire and love of the game waned a wee bit.
Yeah.
Waned a wee bit. My performances were poor. I wasn't playing to the levels that I had been previously. I wasn't being as effective for the team. And probably for the first time, I'm trying to think if I was either a substitute or I get taken off in one of the games. And rightly so, because those guys probably playing better than I was at that time. But to come from where I thought I was to where in reality I was probably the first real challenge in terms of my football.
And at what point did you start to, did that flame get reignited, and you start to regain the self-belief that, did that create doubt in your mind, Paul, that maybe I'm not good enough? Obviously it's difficult, because I've heard other players that I've spoken to in this very platform, saying because of their height, or they didn't grow to the, later stages. And that's, it's a disappointment. It's not like somebody saying to you, well, Paul, we don't feel your right foot's strong enough, or we don't feel that you contribute enough to the game. Things that you could actually take within your control. Yeah. Your height you can't control. Did that cause personal doubt then at that young age?
I don't know if... No, I think I always was strong in my mind that football was what I wanted to do, and that's where I was going to be, and that's what that was the be all and end all for me. Probably at that time, I took a wee bit of time to go over the disappointment. And where it really hit home was normally at the end of the season, we would have an awards with the boys' club.
Yeah.
And at the end of that season, that was the first season I had never won top goal scorer. I'd went to a lad called Kevin McCluskey. Kevin was like banging goals in left, right and centre, and did so for a number of years. He was a good talent as well, Kevin. Good player. I'm still friends with him to this day. But the fact that I never won top goal scorer really irked me at that time. And I think at the start of the next season was like the start of the growth again in terms of me as a player and performances becoming better and really adjusting to the fact that, okay, it hasn't happened at Motherwell for me, but who knows, it could happen elsewhere.
Yeah. And did you come to that realisation yourself, Paul, or did you have anybody to talk to? Obviously, again, and listen, and I know the kind of parents you have and the kind of loving family you had, obviously, in your own home. That was easy to recognise for any as we were growing up. Yours was one of the houses that, there were some houses you felt comfortable going to, and you could chat the door, you could get in the house, and other doors you didn't. And yours was certainly, it was always like that kind of welcome environment. But did you have, were you able to talk to anybody at that age? Because obviously, as much as we can reflect to our age and you look back at 15, 16, it seems such a long time ago, and it's hard to even comprehend feeling like an adult at that age. But when you think at that age, we did feel like young adults. We were leaving school. I left school at 15. You were sort of, and you would get drummed into, you're the man you're ever going to be and stuff. But did you feel you had somebody to talk to, or would you feel now reflecting that there could be a benefit of having somebody to talk to when you're going through the kind of tests?
No, I don't think at that time conversing with somebody in regards to your challenges was the done thing. I think it was just you accepted it, you moved on. Bertie would say, "Come on, what's up with you? What's wrong with you? Come on, get your act together. Come on, G yourself up." But the support I got in the house from mum and dad was exact same then as it was when I was growing up anyway. So that never faltered, that never changed. But probably the fact that Bertie had just so much belief in me, that in itself kind of really helped me through it.
Yeah. That's, again, obviously, as your coach, your team manager, and the way that he would impact yourself and other players around you is massive. But I think that trust element, especially when you've had such a recent disappointment, must have a massive effect, Paul. Because it wasn't just somebody telling you what you wanted to hear, but here was somebody in football you trusted.
Yeah, well, he certainly wasn't somebody who would tell you what you wanted to hear. So from that side of it, he was a hard taskmaster himself.
Yeah.
In terms of what he was looking for out of his players, his teams, or whatever, and that in itself really helped me when I jumped up to be a senior player. Just in terms of how he treated you, is the demands he made on you in fitness levels, the training that he wanted you to do, the regime that he wanted you to do in training. That made the jump for me probably easier than what it may well have been if I'd have been at another kind of boys' club at that time.
Yeah, it's massive. The influence of people who are guiding you in your young career at that stage is I think, and again, finding a pattern through some of the interviews we're doing, it's amazing the influence that the right person is having, and obviously, unfortunately, the influence the wrong person can have if they're not saying and doing the right things. You say the demands in fitness, because obviously it has changed dramatically for day to day as regards nutrition and also that self-discipline's got to be there. I mean, you're on your own at 15, 16. It's so easy today with social media and other influences to take your wrong choices and go on the wrong track. But then for you, Paul, the next step was obviously was Hamilton. So how quickly did that come for you after that disappointment at Motherwell?
Well, I'd left Motherwell, as I say, at 15. Probably the next interest shown in me would have been I was 17, Tommy, and the lad I spoke about earlier, Kevin McCluskey, got invited into Clyde for a trial, and I thought, how am I not getting invited in? Yeah. So Kevin went in trial, come back out, and a few weeks later, a teacher at the school called Jim Friel. Jim was friendly with Craig Brown.
Yeah.
And had a connection with Clyde. And I then get invited to a trial with Clyde at Shawfield. It was a reserve match. I was 17. I'm 17 at the time. Went to the reserve game, and I was a substitute. And after about 5 minutes of the game, Ian Ferguson, the lad who was at Rangers and scored a goal for St Mirren in the cup final, he get taken off and I get put on as a sub. And it must have been like throwing on a 12-year-old boy into a man's game.
Yeah.
Even at 17. Yeah. So I played the game. After the game, well done, blah, blah, back to school. Never heard anything about it again. Get no feedback on it.
That's another massive point, Paul, isn't it? That good, bad, or indifferent. If you have to progress, if you have to develop, you need feedback as some kind of constructive basis. It's imperative. You see so many, you can talk about misguided or having guidance, but actually nothing at all, just isn't the end. And again, obviously, as a coach, I dare say that's a memory that you ensure you don't leave on an imprint on another young player because it sticks with you. But having no feedback at all is worse than, I think, getting negative feedback.
I think, no, you're right. And again, I think that was the way of the world at that time in football. It was just I'm a young kid coming in. Does the manager willing to speak to me? Anyway, we'll be in touch. Kind of one of those.
An addition.
So that I'm 17 at that time. The careers officer at school then takes me in for a meeting. I'm in sixth year, I think it was fifth or sixth year, fifth year at school. And the careers officer says, talk about your career. I think you should be leaving school. I think you should be going to take a YTS. I says, I'm not leaving school. Well, what is it you want to do? I says, well, I want to be a professional footballer. And she went, well, you're 17. It's not looking likely, is it? And I thought, right, okay. I said, well, I'm not leaving school. I'm staying on at school next year because I want to win the Scottish Cup in 6th year with the school team. So that was my aim, to stay on at school. I think I was doing about 2 subjects at school. I don't know why they allowed me to continue. So I'm back to school. We got to the Scottish Cup final. We played against Brighton, who ultimately beat us in the final. But my aim for that whole year was to try and get to the Scottish Cup final with the school team. That was my focus. And in between then, I would be playing games for the Lanarkshire select team against various clubs, doing okay, back to probably scoring a reasonable number of goals. So at the end of my 6th year at school, it was round about, in fact, it was after my birthday. I was still at school. I was 18. I was still at school at 18, believe it or not. And Motherwell asked me to go to a tournament with them in France. And I went in to train with them, Tommy McLean, Tom Forsyth, and I went to the tournament in France, over in a place called Caen, France. And we had a couple of guests playing with Motherwell at the time. One was Brian Hamilton, who just won the Scottish Cup with St Mirren, and one was Scott Nisbet, who'd been playing for Rangers. Yeah. So they were the 2 big, main stars, and I was the 3rd guest from Mary Street Boys Club going back into Motherwell again. Yeah. And I thought, this is my chance again. Went to the tournament. I think I played 20 minutes of the tournament. And I come back home and there was a message at the house to say, listen, John Lambie wants to meet you over at Hamilton. And that week, Bertie took me to Hamilton.
Yeah.
And John Lambie says, right, I want to sign you. They'd just been promoted to the Premier League. So they wanted to take me on a full-time contract on 40 quid a week. And I was like, over the moon.
Yeah. I mean, there's 2 points here, Paul, just to firstly pick up. You talk about obviously trying to make it a Motherwell and then Hamilton, obviously 2 Lanarkshire teams. But there's a Scottish Cup final in 2 schools for the same area. That shows you how tough the competition must have been. I mean, obviously there's players that you played with, like Jim Weir and stuff that stand out. There was at Brighton, but you think just how tough the competition was at your age in that category, which is a frequent thing where you can actually get freak years where you might only get 2 or 3 players, and then you've got other ones where there's 10, 11, 12 players competing for similar, stature at obviously Motherwell or Hamilton. But I think just to not knock down just how big an achievement, you going away to Motherwell, bit of disappointment again, but to get asked to go, and obviously 2 senior players that you've mentioned who had successful careers in their own right. But that's how tough it was. And obviously that was the mix you were in, which, you could probably argue, did that push you further or did that raise your standards because that's the environment you were playing in? But anyway, you went in, that still at school, you get the disappointment at Motherwell. You've just turned 18 and Hamilton offered you straight off the bat, an opportunity into professional football. And especially after what your teacher had to say, how did you must have been absolutely over the moon to get that opportunity.
Yeah. I mean, it was like a dream. Again, it's a dream for you. Just it doesn't matter your club. The fact that they're asking you to go in full time and you're a professional footballer, Accies are in the Premier League. It's an unbelievable opportunity. I had been offered a contract with Dundee because I had played in Dundee's youth team. During my last year at school, I'd been invited up to Dundee to train for a few days. I played in the youth team in the BP Cup, as it was at that time. Yeah. Again, Bertie McShane would be jumping in the car, driving me through up to Dundee. Stayed for a few nights there. I think at the time, it was Archie Knox may well have been the manager.
Yeah.
And I got offered a YTS with Dundee United at 25 quid a week. And I thought, moving house, going up to live in Dundee, 25 quid a week. And at that time, I turned the offer down. And then obviously Motherwell came in, and then after I'd been to Qua with Motherwell, then Accies came in. So there obviously had been a wee bit of interest in and around that time. But the fact that somebody had offered me 40 quid, which was 15 quid more than your £25 YTS money that everybody else was getting. I thought it was a king's ransom.
Included.
Oh, quality.
Aye. And I think as well, Paul, I mean, obviously, as you take the steps forward, we were talking about the disappointment of Motherwell at 15, but there's 3 clubs in a short space of time showing interest. Did you feel your kind of mojo for the game and your own belief in yourself was kind of back at its peak at that stage? Did you feel the doors were starting to open up again?
I did. After the Clyde trial, obviously, I'd went in there, and there was disappointment there. But as that year kind of progressed, my form became reasonably good. I'd also went to Hibs in trial as well. That was like a week after I had turned down Dundee, and funny enough, we played Dundee in a reserve game at Easter Road. I think Bertie Auld was manager at the time, and again, Bert McShane in the car, let's go, we're going to Easter Road, you're on to Hibs in trial. Up to Hibs, had my trial game, and again, it would be a kind of, well, we'll be in touch, we'll keep an eye, but nothing really, nothing concrete. And that's, as I say, that's getting towards the end of my school term and me coming 18, and then the Motherwell asking me to go to France with them. I thought, oh, it's brilliant, go there. The thing that sticks in my mind about going to France was I only had one pair of football boots, and they were screw-in studs. And when we arrived in France, obviously it was roasting, scorching, and the pitches were brilliant grass, but they were rock solid. And I never had a pair of moulded boots with me, and everybody else is running about with the moulded boots, and I'm on there with a pair of screw-ins. It must have been like wearing stilettos during the game. Maybe that's why I only get 20 minutes.
Oh, brilliant. Well, funnily enough, our Maddox, as you know, obviously he's went from Spain back to England, and he's obviously trying to pursue the same journey you have yourself. But he said to me on the phone last night, Dad, I've got one of the boys is offered him. I mean, he's always played with either AstroTurf or but a moulded stud boot, and he's away the day getting his first pair of screw-in studded boots in his life at 16. So, and it's the same thing but completely different. And he's obviously finding playing in grass, how tough it is in your legs and what have you, and it's a completely different test. So the physical fitness and aspect to that, he stepped up. I can see the difference in him going back to the UK. The demands on your legs are just so much more. So when that sort of opportunity had then presented to you, Paul, and you went in, signed with Hamilton, was it straight into the first team, and were you straight into the throes? Because obviously, as you've said, Hamilton had been promoted to the top division in Scottish football. I mean, that's a hell of a jump.
Yeah, no, I went to Hamilton on the basis that I wasn't getting into the first team. 12 months earlier, I was playing a reserve game for Clyde, and was, what would I say, extremely short of being able to play in the first team at that time. So I went in for my first pre-season in June 86. July 86 it would have been. Signed in June, went in July 86, first pre-season, and was joined by James Weir, who you'd mentioned earlier, myself, James and Alan Ferguson. The three of us were the apprentices at the club at the time. So it was our job to maintain the stadium, the pitch and whatever else needed cleaned and done. And we also got to sometimes train and play. But I remember my first reserve game playing at a real stadium. It was at Clydebank. Clydebank at that time it was at Kilbowie, and it was at all-seater.
Yeah.
And I thought, my word, this is brilliant. Because I just came from Watsonville pitch and the Calder Park, two red ash pitches.
Yeah.
To playing at Kilbowie in a reserve game. And the coach at the time was a guy called George Caldwell. And after that game, George took a real shine to me, kind of immediately after that game. So that probably be into August, and by September, there was murmurs that I was going to get my debut for the first team. And we played a bounce game at Douglas Park. John Lambie was manager. And John always had a guy who used to float about the club, and he'd be dropping wee hints in here and there about the managers think, and by the way, managers think they're playing you. And we were playing a bounce game at the Douglas Park, and the ball went behind the goal, and I went up to the terrace and to pick the ball back up and turned my ankle on the way back down. So I think we were playing St Mirren, may well have been on the Saturday. So twisted my ankle, and that put me out for about 2 or 3 weeks. So that was like for the month of September or so. And then in October, I'd been playing reserve games. I'd been doing okay, playing reasonably well. And then I get called into the first team to play against Hibs in October. So in a year and 3 months, I'd come from being miles off it at Clyde in a reserve game to make my debut in the Premier League for Hamilton.
Did you feel, Paul, you know, certain players talk about being ready, but were you aware, if you can recall, that you felt I'm ready for this level? Like, was there doubts, or did you in any way? I mean, you talk about getting in and seeing a full seater stadium and going on. Were you buzzing for that, or did you feel any kind of, oh my God, it was overwhelming at all?
No, at that time I was really fit. I was really quick, and I felt as though I'd been playing reserve games, and we'd be playing against Premier League teams. So, for example, if Hamilton were at home to Aberdeen, we'd be playing Aberdeen at Pittodrie, or Rangers at Ibrox, or Celtic. I'm sure it was at Parkhead. I remember playing a few games at Parkhead, empty stadium, right enough. Now that's the way it was then, and that was like unbelievable for me. So I adjusted quite quickly to that, and I played without any fear. I felt as though I could run past anybody at that time. Not thinking anything at all tactically about the game. Just about what I was going to do when I had the ball at my feet.
I mean, it's great. I mean, you can see me smiling here, but when you're speaking like that, Paul, I can visualize you in that moment. You know, obviously I knew you as a player, and I know the stadiums you're referring to, but I think that's a big thing. You know, I think visualization is really important in young players and how they see themselves and how they see themselves being able to impact the game. And what you've touched on is the way that you did impact games. So, as you say, you know, maybe not being specifically tactically aware or, you know, at that time, but actually how you could impact a game is in your mind, and you're carrying that on the pitch, regardless of whether it's Celtic Park or whether it's Kilbowie or, you know, whether it's Pittodrie. That what's crucial there is how do you, as an individual player, how can you impact that game, and how can you bring what you offer to the game? And I think that's huge. You know, it's actually, I remember listening to, you know, I think we've spoken this before, and listening to the boys that do Open Goal, you know, Cy Ferry, and they were talking about getting the opportunity to train with the first team and thinking, right, don't do anything wrong, which is a totally different mindset. You know, when you've reached that stage, when you've reached any stage where you're being invited into that environment, it's so crucial for any young player, I think, to be able to say, right, what do I offer? So offer that. Because if you go and try and play within yourself, or you go and try and play in a restricted manner, nobody's going to see what got you there in the first place. And I think, again, it gets back to that statement is so crucial, to go and express yourself in the way you know how. You've got to play within formations. You've got to play within the tactics that the manager demands. But the reason you're there at that stage, you know, and at that level, is because you've earned the right to be there. And the only way you step up is to continue to do what you do and do it well. And play with the freedom and flexibility that allows you to express what you offer best, you know. And I dare say that's something you'll see now as a coach, where your expectations for certain players, they'll go, when they take that step up, are they equipped to deal with it psychologically so that they continue to play with the freedom that's got them there, regardless of the changes that are going on round about them? You know, is that fair, Paul? Do you see that or are aware of it?
I think when you say I would be training with the first team, and I remember one session in particular, and again I was the wee kid in the block, and we had a bounce game at May Street, first team and the rest of us, and I was playing against the first team fullback at that time, and I just had one of those sessions where it just happened for me, and I gave the fullback, I won't name him, Jimmy Sinclair, but I gave him a hard time in training, and I think then John Lambie's looked and thought to himself, without actually knowing who I was, really, I think he's not bad. Gives us something that we've not got, and from then I think it kind of progressed. I was fortunate enough to play in a reserve team with some brilliant senior players: Sinky, Tom O'Neill, John Brogan, Jerry Phillips, Jerry Collins, John Pelosi. I mean, these guys at that time were like recognised first team players at a good level. I mean, John Brogan, I think, won top scorer in the championship so many times. So I was fortunate to be in the environment with them. But again, I had a kind of carefree attitude that just give me the ball and I'll run past somebody.
That's brilliant.
And was allowed to do that, in fairness. Was allowed to do that.
That in itself is fantastic. That's the other big thing that, you know, you've spoke obviously about the influence of Bertie McShane, but the school teachers as well that you mentioned. I think that pattern and that mindset of managers entrusting in you to entrusting yourself to play with complete freedom, then it allows you to go and see the game the same as you've probably seen most other games in your life, you know, to play it the way you see football.
No, 100%. You use the word trust there. There's nothing worse when you're on the pitch and you know you don't have the trust of the manager.
Yeah.
And I've experienced that on numerous occasions where I know I'm on the pitch, but I've not really got the 100% backing of the manager. And that reflects in how you play, what you do, because you're conscious if you make a mistake, the manager will be going, told you shouldn't have played.
Aye.
Or, nah, get him off, he's not doing this, he's not doing that. Or, the best performances that I would have had throughout my career, and the manager here had a spell at Morton where I knew he trusted me, and I probably had some of my best games for Morton at that time, and wasn't getting in the team before he came, Ian McCall, and had a really good period of time latterly in my career. And I'm 32, 33 years of age, but I've got the trust of the manager. Yeah. And I can go out and I can play the way and with the freedom that I know will benefit the team. Yeah. So that's at 32, 33. If you're 17, 18, 19 and you've got the trust or you don't have the trust of the manager, that's a huge
and obviously, as you say, like at that last stage of your career at Morton, it was still pivotal, but you've got the experience of the game by that stage, Paul, knowing how to handle it. Again, at 17, 18, you can feel a wee bit on an island, like, well, what do I do here? You know, and how do, you know, for any young player that's in a training environment, an academy, youth development or first team environment and thinking, what do I do here if you've not got that relationship with the manager and you don't feel it's there? You feel you're maybe trying to earn it, but you're getting a fair crack. I mean, you talked there about playing with so many senior players, but obviously not only having the faith of the manager, but the faith of the other players that they trust you. You know yourself, Paul, when you're on the pitch, if you're getting fed the ball on a regular basis or whether they're taking a sidestep and turning and playing it in that direction. And that's a great feeling for the players you're playing with, knowing that they've got the trust and faith in you as a player to say, listen, you know, regardless of age or experience, give him the ball. He'll go and hurt people, you know. And that must have felt great at that young age.
Yeah, obviously that's your introduction. Your introduction is always the kind of fairy tale part. When you start losing games and you're tactically inept for the team. Those senior players are no longer telling you then that you better get your act together here because you're costing us goals.
And then your contributions two directions. You can't just run down the one, you've got to run back up it.
Exactly.
And so then through for Hamilton, Paul, you sort of obviously did a good time at Hamilton, a good successful period at Hamilton, and then came interest for England. And how did, I mean, for a young boy growing up in Lanarkshire, obviously having been at Motherwell, going to Hamilton, how important, they were two homegrown clubs to you, although they were Premiership clubs in Scotland. But when interest started to come for England, how did that sort of impact on you? How did you feel?
I thought at the time it was brilliant. It was great. We were playing in the Premier League, and anything that you'd done in the Premier League was kind of highlighted. So any good run of that you'd make and cross into the box and set up a goal was brilliant, great. I then get some interest from Nottingham Forest. It's something I think Nottingham Forest had maybe made an offer or whatever. It'd been in the newspaper that Nottingham Forest were interested. And I was 19 at the time. And somebody gave me the worst bit of advice I've ever had in football. They said that a good player will always do one thing in a game, right? And for about 3 years, I took that literally. I thought that if I'd done one good thing, or I had one good run, or I had one good pass in a game, that people would go, by the way, he's a good player.
Yeah.
And it was the worst piece of advice I'd ever got. It took me about 3 years to realise, listen, you need to park that. That's just rubbish. You have to work, you have to play for 90 minutes. So between the age of 19 and 20, well, from 19 for a few years, there was always interest, but nothing concrete. Yeah. And I had huge ups and downs with it. I'm out the team at Hamilton. I'm back in again. Managers are changing. I'm back out the team. I'm back in again. So that's probably for about a good 4 years, 5 years. Billy McLaren then came in as manager. In between John Lambie coming and going, in and out of Partick at the time. Billy came in, kind of steadied the ship a wee bit. He was a brilliant coach, Billy, really forward-thinking coach. First guy ever to do sports science, fast feet and all that. And the team played really well, but it was a team. It wasn't about the individual, and I had to fit into that team, and I had to work my socks off to remain in the team as such, regardless of your individual capabilities. If you don't play within the team and what he wants you to do, you'll not play. So we just missed out in promotion to the Premier League with 2 goals that season. And I had an okay season, had some good moments, but for me, I was more kind of run of the mill, back covering most of the time, a lot of the time, but having to get forward. Billy then lost his job and Ian Munro came in. And Ian Munro said to me, I don't want to see you by the halfway line. I want you to do everything that you can in the other half of the pitch. And that trust that Ian Munro gave me was just like a weight off your shoulders. Yeah. And I only worked with him for a year. And within that year, I had been to Newcastle on trial. Newcastle were interested in going to make an offer. And then I went to Southampton in trial. After Newcastle, I said to Ian, I'm not going anywhere else in trial. If somebody wants to take me, they'll come and buy me. He says, no, Southampton have come in, you have to go to Southampton. So I thought, right, I'm getting this one last crack. Went down to Southampton, did well over the week. Various age groups, trained with the 18s, trained with the reserves, trained with the first team, under all different coaches. Come back home again and finished the season at Hamilton. I get top goal scorer for the first time ever. Scored 14 goals.
What age were you then, Paul?
Now that's the question. I'm 25 at that time, Tommy.
Yeah.
25 years of age. Now, people think I went to Southampton when I was 18, 19.
Yeah.
I moved for the Championship or the First Division at that time in Scotland to the Premier League at 25 years of age, which I think now would be unheard of. if you're 25, you're not going to the Premier League for the First Division.
And yet in their days, Paul, they would always argue that I dare say now, obviously, people's careers are getting longer out of careers, but the peak time, our peak age for any player at that time was probably 27, 28. So even at that stage, you still hadn't quite reached your peak. So it's probably, I mean, for a sort of observation point of view, it's probably not as unnatural as it might have seemed to you. But at the same time, mentally, you were an established professional footballer by that stage. You weren't a wee boy, so it was probably a good time. Is it fair to say it was maybe a good time at your age to be able to
100%.
that type of upheaval? Did that unsettle you at all, Paul, just to before you move on? But see the speculation, and you hear it all the time, players saying that it's unsettled them. Were you able to still stick to the job at hand? I mean, to finish top goal scorer that season, whilst you were getting in and out of these different trials, did you feel you could handle that no problem?
I handled it then because I was mature enough to handle it then. I didn't handle it when I was 19 enough at 19. I'm not even using the word probably. I did get carried away with myself then. I thought it was just going to be a matter of time. Listen, somebody's going to come in for you. You're going to get a big move. Never happened. And as I say, at 25, you're right. I probably hit the best period of my career in terms of consistency through the trust of the manager.
Yeah.
Through the what the manager wanted from me suited me.
Yeah. And that's massive, Paul, obviously, because the other thing there that you touch on is there's managers coming and going, and in actual fact, you reach a stage where as a player, you've been at Hamilton longer than some of the managers, or most of the managers that were managing you. So that can be quite upsetting, and especially because of the type of player you were, where it's no, you don't play, how you play as part of a team, but also as part of an individual is going to be up for question for a specific manager in the formation that he's going to play. You played on the wing, you need somebody who's got an attack-minded approach to the game to allow you to play the way you want to play, because it's not just, boys club level where you can go out and turn up and play the way you feel. You've got to play as part of that unit as you touched on there. And then obviously when it comes the big move, is it fair to say to you then that it's crucial that you pick the right club with the right manager at that time so that you get to continue to play the way you foresee you playing the game as an individual?
Yes and no. Obviously, if a Premier League club come in for you, you're not going to question who the manager is or what his motives are going to be when he signs you. Had I stayed in Scotland, maybe it would have been slightly different. I was just desperate for a move to the next level from Hamilton. I'd been there for 7 years, and I was just really desperate to try and get to. It was the Premier League in England. Desperate to get to the Premier League in England, and in that summer, Ian Monroe was away on holiday, and I'd get a phone call to say that Southampton want you to go down and speak to them. And I went down with the agent that was representing me at the time, and also went down with a lad called Colin Cram. Crammy was only 17. He just broke into the Hamilton team. 17, 18, I think Crammy was. Broke into the Hamilton team, done really well. So both of us had went down to Southampton on trial together, and they'd come back and they'd bid for both of us to go down. So down, spoke terms, came back, and I got a phone call from Ian Monroe to say, I hear you've left. So he was unaware of the situation when I'd went. He says, I had a deal struck with Swindon, with Glenn Hoddle for you to go down. Swindon had just been promoted to the Premier League at the time.
Yeah.
Whereas Southampton were more of a kind of established Premier League team. Yeah. So anyway, that happened. We agreed terms and signed for Southampton that summer, having worked with Minnie for 1 year. And as I say, it was a brilliant year for me.
It shows you as well, Paul, in that situation, obviously it was a big move for the club as well as you as an individual, and how as a young or as a player, but as a young player for Crammy, and how for yourself as an established player, there's a move that the manager didn't really know was taking place. But obviously for a club like Hamilton, or for a lot of young players that's at clubs that, the funding is important, and especially, post-COVID, there's clubs that are probably doing deals where, maybe at some stage players don't even know what's happening, but the club's hands are tied. They've got to make the move, And obviously Ian Munro will be experienced enough to know that wasn't necessarily down to you, but it was down to the club having to look for that kind of deal, But nonetheless, so there was your opportunity to go and play for a Premiership club. I mean, that must have been an incredible feeling for you yourself.
No, it was the pinnacle for me. The fact that I'm signing for a Premier League club in England is just like, that is the dream, was the dream for me. When you get there, it's just another football club.
Yeah. Did you feel that, Paul? Did you feel that when you go there?
Yeah. At that time, it was just another football club. I think if you go now, in the present day, you're going into a completely different environment.
Yeah. I heard Kieran Tierney talking about that, actually, about how when he went, obviously, I mean, he achieved, Champions League at Celtic and a lot of massive experiences. And then when he went into Arsenal, he said he felt miles off it. So it's interesting that, how the change of time changes because of maybe the things that are available to clubs that have got the finances to have greater resources. Then things are changing in the game. But for you going on the pitch and that, Paul, when you turned up at training for the first time, I mean, you've went that first season getting into Southampton, to you, was it still just a football pitch? It was still just players, and you were going on there to prove yourself. Did you feel comfortable with that? That wasn't overwhelming at all?
Not initially. No, I think when I went with the belief that I was going to make a mark at the football club. During my trial period, there had been a coach there called Dave Merrington. Dave was a big Geordie guy, very charismatic, and he kind of took a shine to me during the 5 days that I had been down. And the day that I arrived at Southampton for pre-season, he came into the changing room and he gave me a big thumbs up. And he was. What would happen is that he would take the 18s one year and the reserves the next year, and the two coaches would flip each year. So it would be him or a guy called Ray Graydon, who was a former player at Aston Villa and former coach at Southampton. So they would flip positions. But Dave came in the first day, gave me the big thumbs up. Went out pre-season training. Pre-season was as hard as pre-season ever is. I think we went to the army barracks. We'd done pre-season at the army barracks, which was a tough pre-season, as they all are. And then I went to Sweden on tour with the first team. I think it was for 10 days or so, and felt part of the group, albeit as a new player. I'm not the type to go in and fill the room with laughter straight away. So kept my head down, played a few games over in Sweden, enjoyed that experience, come home again, and they were due to go to Italy. And we would have some practice matches during that time at training, and you'd want to be one of the group to go and to get in the flight to Italy for sure. And done okay in the practice matches. Anyway, made the squad for Italy. Went to Italy for a tournament in Italy against the Juventus, Cagliari and Torino. Again, an unbelievable experience for a wee guy from Motherwell to be turning out against some of these teams. Came home from there and got a couple of wee niggling injuries, things I'd never had in my career. Just wee silly things that I would come off in a game. And probably at that time, the coach may have been looking and thinking, he's a bit weak, coming off injured, maybe no training the next day, maybe having another wee niggle. Things that I never ever had during the previous part of my career.
Yeah.
So that in itself threw up its challenges. Found myself then training with the reserves rather than the first team.
Yeah.
Played the first reserve game of the season. Matthew Letizzi at that time was in the reserves. He played the first reserve game of the season. And then for me, it was right, I need to fight my way out of here up to the next stage. The reserves and the first team would train at two different venues. So we would train at the university. The first team would train at Marchwood at the training ground. So I came from being part of the first team pre-season plans to kind of draw them out a wee bit.
And just down to the injuries, Paul, just having these niggling injuries had put you out the picture.
I probably don't having these wee niggles. However, in training, Dave Merrington saw something in training, and with a wee practice game, and I get knocked off the ball probably too easily, which was I never normally did. I was normally quite wiry, but I was getting knocked off the ball and he went mental at me. So after training, he went, I want to speak to you. Went on to the dugout and he went through me. Do you think you should be here? Why should you be here? Do you think you're ready to be here? Because in training performances, I don't think you're ready to be here. I think you're too weak for this and that was the first time that somebody had ever said that I was kind of weak mentally.
Yeah.
And I thought, phew. And from that day, my performances in the reserves gradually got to the level that they should have been. And all of a sudden he's thinking, I've now got his trust because he's going like that.
You've reacted. And did you see that, Paul, getting hit? I mean, obviously, again, you were in the throes of your career by that stage, but it would be easy to maybe that have flipped the other way. But did you find you could respond well to being spoke to in that type of tone and that type of sort of manner, going away that day? Did you think, right, I'll need to buck my ideas up, or did you feel dented?
Well, I think probably the type of player I was, Tommy. Throughout my career, I was often on the wrong end of the manager's tongue. So it was something that I could handle. Again, I still had belief in my ability.
Yeah.
I had belief that I could, if given an opportunity, do okay.
Yeah.
Even at that level.
That self-belief's huge, Paul. And sorry to cut in there, but it is, that self-belief in the moments is paramount.
Absolutely. I think if you doubt yourself, other people will doubt you. And there's a fine line between having self-belief and being cocky.
Yeah.
I don't think I was ever cocky. I wouldn't say I was cocky, but I had belief that I could play.
Yeah. That's another good point, because that I mean, I know obviously the type of humility you have as a fella, I mean, for at any age and any stage I've known you, you've never, personality's never altered. You're a gentleman, and has always been there. But you can still have humility and self-belief, and you can sort of lack humility and have arrogance, and I think it's in football, people talk about having that arrogance to go in and have the belief to impose yourself. But I'm with you. I don't think you need to be cocky to be arrogant. I think self-belief lasts. That inner confidence comes from the experience of knowing how many times in your career you've turned up and proved yourself. That sort of egotistical belief where, the first sight of a crumble, that's when players do collapse, because the belief's not about what they have within, it's about what other people have told them. I think there's a huge difference there, and so, and again, I've seen that pattern with players such as yourself turning up at any environment and saying, no, I'm good enough for this, and knowing it.
Yeah, no, as you say, if you doubt yourself, people will doubt you. There's enough doubters out there anyway. without you being wanted out yourself.
Absolutely.
But that was a key moment for me, was when Dave went through me at training, and I knew that I wasn't looking the part. And listen, paying, I don't know, 110 grand from Hamilton doesn't make you a Premier League player in England. You're just a wee guy from Scotland going down to England to try and make it a big club in a big environment. And it was the first year of the actual Premier League.
Yeah.
I think it was the inception of the Premier League that year. But from then on, my performances, and Dave was the reserve manager at the time, steadily got better and better and better. And then it was, by the way, Gaffer's thinking of playing you Saturday. I think we were playing Spurs or something. And then I got a wee nick. We were playing a reserve game against Chelsea. And I got a nick in the back of my calf. I was receiving a throw-in, and the Chelsea player, who was Davy Hopkin at the time, came through the back of me a wee bit. Nothing malicious. And I felt a wee thing in my back of my knee. And at that time I didn't realise what it was, but I had actually torn my cruciate slightly, so I just nicked it. And then for a couple of weeks after that, 2 weeks after that, I'd be in training. I'd be kind of in training with the first team group, and with a couple of reserve games. With each of the reserve games, my knee would buckle. Yeah. And then one day I was training out in the pitch and it just buckled completely and I couldn't carry on. And when I went to the hospital, they went and operated, and they thought they were going in for a cartilage repair operation. Yeah. And when I woke up, the doctor says, no, listen, it's a career-threatening injury you have. It's the same injury as Paul Gascoigne's. You've torn your cruciate ligament. And he showed me the video of it. Showed me the video of the damage. And that night, that day, I was actually supposed to travel with the first team. They were playing Everton away. And I was lying in the hospital, and Ian Brandfoot, who was the manager at Simon at Southampton, Ian Brandfoot, phoned me from the hotel in Merseyside to say, listen, I heard the news, don't worry about it, you'll come back, you'll be fine. So wee words of condolence before he goes out to play a game with the first team, which was, again, the mark of the guy. He was a brilliant man, Ian Brandfoot. He got a hell of a time at Southampton with the supporters. Yeah. But as a person, as a man, he was a fantastic guy. Someone who I actually still speak to sometimes now.
What did you have left in your contract at that time, Paul?
I'd signed a 2-year contract, so I was effectively missing my first year. So I would have 1 year left thereafter. Yeah.
And did it raise? I mean, your heart must have sank. You've woke up, think you're going in for a routine operation. You wake up, and the term there for any player, a career-threatening injury. How did you feel waking up to that?
Devastated.
Yeah.
Devastated. The fact that most of my career had been relatively. I had one injury, one knee injury that I had that put me out maybe for 4 to 6 weeks. That was the longest period that I'd ever been out.
Yeah.
But to receive the news that you'd done your cruciate, it's career-threatening.
Yeah.
Was like, I was devastated by that.
What was going through your mind at that stage, Paul? That early stage of the...
Possibly no playing again, Tommy. The fact that it is career-threatening, but we think we can repair it. And the fact that I was at the Premier League looking for my big opportunity, and then all of a sudden it's like gone.
And so from that point, the recuperation and the sort of journey back, how did that unfold, and how did you emotionally, how were you able to deal with that?
Emotionally, it was a drain. For 6 weeks, I had a plaster on up to the top of my hip. Yeah. Then when the plaster comes off, you get very little movement in your leg. The rehabilitation at that time, probably for a Premier League club, was limited. Yeah. Limited, so you would get in to see the physio. The physio would give you a wee bit of exercise to do on the table, then really you're left to your own devices, essentially. And I was fortunate there was a couple of lads there, Perry Groves being one and Stuart Gray being another, who had long-term injuries. And two really fit lads who knew how to push themselves in terms of rehabilitation. So I was with them, and had probably had I not been with them and been in a different circumstance, I'm not sure I would have come back from that injury as effectively.
And especially because that's your first major injury, but it's obviously, you know, it's not just your first major injury, like a leg break or whatever. It's a career-threatening injury. So having the wherewithal, maybe somebody that's had a few injuries in their career might have had a different approach to it for the minute it happened. But given that it was your first major injury, is evident, obviously, having that support for two players going through it, experiencing emotionally what you would be at the same time, knowing how to handle it, and also to encourage you to see the light at the end of the tunnel coming out the other end.
Well, the fact that you know you're going to be out for 12 months itself is an emotional challenge for you, and you can't speed up that recovery. That was at that time. That was the recovery.
Yeah.
I'm aware now they've cut that down to, I think we're down at 6 months now, maybe even quicker.
Career-threatening an injury now either, unless it's horrific.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
It's a run of the mill injury now. I don't mean run of the mill, but it's prominent within the game.
Yeah.
But people come back from it. But at that time, as I say, facing 12 months without playing, down in a Premier League club, away from home.
Yeah.
The away from home part was probably wasn't as challenging as it maybe would have been if I'd been there at 19.
Yeah.
And
Angela was with you.
Angela was down with me now. Angela, obviously, we're now married, but we moved down there together for the 5 years prior to us getting married. We'd been together for a number of years before that anyway. So the fact that we had quite a solid home background was probably easier to deal with. Had I been a young and single lad getting into digs or getting into my own flat, it may well have been different.
Yeah. That's massive. I mean, that makes it, and obviously, again, I can say, because I know Angela, but Angela had such a great nature that it would be, you know, as much support as you say, if you'd been a young lad and you'd maybe be yearning for your parents or for comfort of your parents in your own home, that would have made it more difficult. But having that sort of a feeling of home whilst away would make a huge difference while you're going through such a tough test. And so then as that progressed, Paul, and obviously the recovery did start to come and you started to see a way back, you know, did the kind of burning desire then to obviously fulfill what you went there for in the first place? Did you start to get that feeling in the second 6 months? Towards the tail end of that season, I was relatively mobile again, and then going into pre-season, I was relatively mobile, but unconsciously probably protecting the knee because of the position that I played. If I'm out in the wide area, it's my standing leg when I'm going delivering crosses into the box. I'm conscious of the fact that somebody could come and get injured. So I had to put that to the back of my mind in training. And then one day during training, the balls came across and one of the lads has come to close me down, and I've just lashed it with my right foot, my injured knee. And from that moment, I was then confident in the fact that I didn't pull out it, I lashed it, I didn't get injured. From then on, and it was still a slow progress. It took me probably 3 months of the season, the next season, to really get up to some sort of speed. By that time, Dave, who was now the under-18s manager, and Ray Graydon was now the reserve team manager. Yeah.
So that changed the dynamics slightly as well, because I've now went from a guy who I probably had loads of trust in and he'd belief in me, to a guy who
Didn't
probably
know
he was a winger, maybe compared himself to me and thought, well, at this level. And I never had as warming a relationship with Ray as I did with Dave.
Did you sense that, Paul, immediately?
Straight away.
Yeah.
You know it straight away. And as I say, I'm coming back from an injury. For that second part of the season, I think I was going on loan. I went on loan to Burnley.
Yeah.
So I'd get back in, get through the early part of the rehabilitation games, etc., and was kind of getting up to speed. I needed games. I needed first team games, because I'd been now a year and a half without any first team games at all.
Yeah.
And that again is difficult when you're
match fitness,
used to being involved at the sharp end of it. So I went on loan to Burnley. Jimmy Mullen was manager, and Jimmy knew me from my time at Hamilton, and the type of player I was at Hamilton he wanted to take to Burnley. Now, bearing in mind that was pre having a cruciate ligament injury. So I went to Burnley, 2 months at Burnley, did okay. Good group of players, some good experienced players there. Ted McMahon was in the team, Adrian Heath was in the team, Kurt Nogan was in the team. They had a reasonable squad. It didn't quite work out. I never really settled in Burnley, and I really yearned to go back down south.
Yeah.
To Southampton to go back again. So I went back to Southampton again after that. And my contract, I think, was my contract run and done, or was it being renewed? Was that the second season? Back to Southampton anyway, and Dave Merrington had got the manager's job. He'd get the manager's job after Alan Ball. Alan Ball had come in. I'd made my debut at Southampton. I made my debut at Southampton through with Alan Ball as manager. After playing for the reserves, again, time plays tricks with your mind in terms of order. So I came back from my cruciate. I'd made my debut, I think. I'd made my debut by then. I'm not even quite sure. Tommy, do you know that? In terms of the chronological order.
What would you be then, Paul? Like sort of 27?
27. Yeah, 27.
And the thing is, going for that move, and then obviously with the injury, leading up to the sort of highlight the opportunity of making your debut, and then in effect, there's a year just to cut out your career. So and for that moment to come. So then when you get your debut, did you feel like mentally were you ready, and the injuries by you, were you happy? Did you feel the opportunity opening up finally for you then?
Well, to be fair, I think I went in loan, and then I came back, and I felt at home again. I felt comfortable in my environment, and I was doing really well in the reserves. But everybody else seemed to be getting an opportunity, and I would be scoring goals, I'd be setting up goals, I'd be playing well in games, and I still wouldn't get called into the squad.
Yeah.
And then Ray Grading came to me after a reserve game one night at Marchwood. He says, "Gaffer says you're in tomorrow." And I went, "Hallelujah."
Aye.
And I said it in a flippant way.
Yeah.
And he went, and he kind of had a wee go. He says, well, you're not happy with that? I says, well, I'm happy with that. That's why I'm here.
Aye.
Because I felt as though I had merited an opportunity that other players had been getting.
Yeah.
So Alan Ball had taken me with the squad. We had a home game against Norwich City at the Dell. And on the day of the game, I had a chap at the door in my flat, and I opened the door and my dad was standing. bizarrely, my dad had come down from home to Southampton unannounced. I had no idea he was coming down.
Yeah.
And that night I made my debut at the Dell.
That's fantastic.
It was
Brilliant, Paul.
it was scary.
Aye.
It was
How did
scary.
it, yeah, I mean, obviously your dad being there, but that must have been a brilliant. And again,
Yeah.
you know, you're experiencing similar with you and Oliver, but that's fate. But that must have been absolutely brilliant.
Oh, it was amazing, and the fact that he was, as I say, the fact that he was there. So it was a substitute appearance against Norwich City. We drew one each, and then I had a kind of big press thing in the local press just regarding my comeback from injury.
Yeah.
To be able to make my debut in the first team. After that, again, I get another. In fact, I didn't. I took a virus immediately after the game. It knocked me out for about 10 days, 2 weeks or so. Then I had a couple of substitute appearances. The first team, Alan Ball then left. Alan Ball went to Manchester City, I think.
Yeah.
And Dave Merrington got the job. Dave Merrington would get the job the following season, and Dave came in. I get a new contract, and Dave came in and says, "With me, you're going to get a chance. I know what you can do. I know what you can do. It's the first day of pre-season. I know what you can do. You're going to get a chance with me as manager."
And you must have felt that Paul was going to be the case, because obviously you'd had a great relationship with him for you'd went to the club on trial even before you signed. So you must have been expecting that's what was coming.
Yeah, well, I felt as though when you say about, do you feel as though your opportunity is coming? Aye. That was the moment I thought, I'm going to get a chance here. I'm going to get a crack at this. Under Alan Ball, I was never going to be a regular within the squad. He left to go to Man City. Dave got the job. And as I say, his first day, that was his announcement. Because he would always say to me in games, after games in the team talk, if I was a manager at a club, I would buy you. I would buy you if I was a manager. And that made me feel amazing, brilliant. Yeah. So I knew I had his trust. And for him to get the manager's job was like a dream again for me.
Yeah.
We went to Ireland pre-season, and played a couple of games over there, then come home, and they were going to Holland the following week, and we were on the training pitch, and somebody says to me, Macca, Dave wants to see you. And he always called me Macca.
Yeah.
Macca. They say, Macca, Dave wants to see you, Gaffer wants to see you. So I went into his office, we office at the training ground, and he says, Paul, in you come. And he called me Paul.
It's Christian name.
And straight away I thought, oh, okay. So I sat down. He said, sit down, Paul, sit down. Just to let you know, he says, I'm going to put you in the transfer list.
Yeah.
And I thought, wow. It was like 3 weeks into him being manager. I'm going to put you in the transfer list. Just we're in the Premier League here. It's Premier League players we're looking for, and blah, blah. And I thought, wow, okay. So I said a couple of wee things that probably he didn't like.
Yeah. And
when we went back onto the pitch, he pulled everybody together and he highlighted, he said a couple of things in the changing room in the office here I didn't like. That's not true. I'm my own man here. Laurie McMenemy was the director of football at the club. So yeah. Laurie would make a lot of the decisions.
Yeah.
But I didn't lose any respect for Dave at that time. That was his decision. He was the manager. I respected that.
Yeah.
And then that's it. Thereafter, I went on loan to Burnley. I came back because I needed first team games.
Yeah. I
came back from Burnley. Semi-successful period. I didn't really enjoy my time. Then when I came back, Dave actually put me back into the Southampton team. I played in the FA Cup South Coast Derby in January, and I did reasonably well. Following week, we went to Nottingham Forest. I come on as a sub, and I got the highlight in the local newspaper of being the highlight of the game when I come on as a sub.
Yeah.
And then the following week he signed Mark Walters.
Another winger.
And with Mark Walters coming in, I thought that's another obstacle in my way here in terms of getting a run. And rather than waiting and seeing things settle down, I was always quite.
Paul, just because before you say that, because I know what you're going to say, but that must have been really hard for you, with so many mixed messages. You get put on loan, you've got a manager you believe does trust you, and I think it's fair to say probably did, and obviously, listen, I remember the day. I mean, Laurie McMenemy was a legend at Southampton. And for so many clubs like Southampton, clubs like Ipswich, and you mentioned Norwich and teams like that, where legends get involved in the running of the club. You talk about directors of football in the modern day, and you see the conflict a lot of the times with managers. I think it's fair to say that it's happened at Rangers through a season, and then there's that doubt, who really signed him and who really wants you? And there's a manager that's told you they're going to put you in the transfer list, yet as soon as you were back available at the club, he puts you back in the team. So you can probably see that his personal feelings towards you as a player and what you could offer Southampton but never waned. They were probably there throughout, but it's fair to say he probably was doing what he was being sort of instructed to do. But for you, you've came back in there, he's put you straight back in the squad and straight back in the team, and then they go and sign Mark Walters a week later. I mean, that must have been hell of a difficult to deal with, from what you were contributing, what you were being asked to contribute, to what you were seeing in the background.
No, absolutely. The small opportunities that I'd got to be in the first team, I thought I handled them reasonably well. And again, in hindsight, I probably should have just sat tight for maybe a month or so to see how things transpired. But at the time, I was. You were right. Too many mixed messages, and I would never accuse anybody of interfering with anybody else's management at clubs. But Dave was the youth team manager or reserve team manager who'd got the first team job, massive Premier League job, and had a bit of experience previously in his career. But Laurie was a big personality at the football club, huge personality. And I would assume was heavily involved in any decisions that were made at the club.
Yeah.
But as I say, at that period of time, Mark Walters came in. I then decided to move on. I'd got an offer to go to Brighton, which suited me. I could stay in my house where I was and commute to Brighton, who were going to ground share at Portsmouth. Subsequently, Mark Walters got injured, I think, and missed most of that season.
And the thing is, Paul, for you at that time, just again, thinking about it, you've been out for a year. All you want to do is play.
Yeah.
So the thought of that being, not a challenge, but obviously getting the mixed messages, it's different if you're actually saying, right, listen, Paul, Mark Walters has come in and it's going to be against you or him. But whoever does the best or whoever proves themselves the most worthy is going to be the one to play. But actually, as a player there, you're sitting psychologically not knowing what's coming next. So you can totally appreciate why the decision to go to Brighton was probably made all the easier for you, in your mind. Because you don't know if really, it's fair to say you wouldn't have known if you were coming or going, because you don't really know if your performances there aren't meriting the decision that's been made.
Yeah.
And that's where, when we've spoke before ourselves, and you see a lot of players talk about why they moved at a particular time, and people say, well, you should never have left, or clubs, fans on fan groups saying, I wish he'd have stayed. But it shows you the complexities of what's going on behind the scenes that a lot of times the average punter just doesn't know what's going on.
Don't see. Also, Southampton at that time had a left winger called Neil Heaney, and Neil Heaney was a consistent performer. Was a strong running wide player. So my opportunities in that position would be limited anyway. Yeah. But to add Mark Walters into that mix as well, makes it even more difficult to try and in some way establish yourself. But as I say, from the small opportunities that I got, I thought I handled them okay.
Yeah.
The opportunity to come to go to Brighton, who were 2 leagues below, came around. Jimmy Case was manager, and I took that opportunity to go and play first team football, because for almost 3 years I had only played a handful of first team games.
Yeah.
And there was a real frustration in that.
And then, so when you went to Brighton, and obviously Jimmy Case, who's a Liverpool legend, but a legend within the game himself, was, did you feel then that as far as playing in England was concerned, here was an opportunity to reignite and to be yourself really where you believed you'd went to England to be in the first place?
Yes and no. I went to Brighton. Brighton were a huge club, massive club with great tradition, but they were languishing in league. I think it'd be League One at that.
Yeah,
it'd be League One now.
Yeah.
But it was I think it was the second division at that time, and had various protests against. Yeah, 12%.
Aye, there you go, Paul. You in?
Aye, sorry, mate.
No, it's, do you know what happened? The same with, I was doing Henrik's the other day. His battery was going. No, I've actually plugged mine's in because I was doing a test with Aidan this morning. I seen how quick it just drained because you're filming.
Aye.
So
I didn't realise it was coming up. So it was like 20%. Then it went into saver mode, and then it was at 18, 12, and then it just cut out.
I know it's easy done. No, that's fine because all we'll do is just cut the middle bit out, Paul. Just cut the gap bit, and they'll just link the two together. So, let me just check. Aye, that's fine. So, just getting back. So the opportunity came, Paul, to go to Brighton, and then obviously you went there, and as you say, they were sort of obviously your dream had been to go and play in the Premiership, but then they would be in League One at that time. But sort of making that choice primarily for first team football, how did you feel then getting in there? Was it a chance to sort of reignite your dream and to play in England, professionally?
Yes, it was a chance to play first team football first and foremost. When I got to Brighton, I realised the impact that the protests and all that were having at the club. It was something that I was unaware of until I actually went. Yeah. We were supposed to be favourites to go up. We ended up getting relegated that season. So I joined around about, I think it was in March, and I played 2 or 3 games, and then we had a game at Wickham when I went over in my ankle.
Yeah. And
that put me out for the rest of the season. So I only actually played 3 games in my first season for Brighton.
Yeah.
Again, arriving at a new club and being injured almost immediately. It was like deja vu from exactly what happened at Southampton.
Did you find it easier to deal with injuries, Paul, because of the injuries you'd had by that stage, or was it still just totally deflating?
Absolutely deflating, because it wasn't. Injuries weren't something that I was used to for the 7 years I was at Hamilton.
Yeah,
I was really kind of injury free. I didn't really have many what you'd call serious injuries, but this ankle, the ankle injury, put me out from March until July. Yeah. So it was a relatively long period of time.
Yeah.
Particularly when you've just went to a club looking to re-establish yourself again, and play first team football. So that again was a knock. We then get relegated through various things that were happening in and around the club, protests, etc. Fan protests were happening on a game-to-game basis. So the following season, we're now in League 3rd Division. Again, favourites to go up.
Yeah.
Because I thought we'd assembled a decent squad. With a brilliant person as manager, Jimmy Case. Really, really great lad, great guy. Jimmy was the most down-to-earth and humble guy you've ever met for having such huge success as a footballer.
And that carried into the dressing room, Paul, that his impact as a person, obviously, that it was able to enthuse and that you could see that in the group.
Yeah, I mean, he instantly commanded respect just for who he was.
Yeah.
For who he was, but he was such a soft-spoken, nice guy until he crossed the white line, and he would be like a chameleon. He'd completely change when he got on the pitch.
Yeah.
But sadly, that season didn't go too well for Jimmy or for the club. Over the whole season, in fairness, we underperformed.
Yeah.
He lost his job, and we ended up fighting to stay in the league. on the very last game of the season at Hereford, which is now well documented in terms of Brighton's history.
Yeah.
But throughout that, the first part of that season, the first 4 or 5 months of that season before Jimmy lost his job, I think again was the substandard performances personally.
Yeah.
Personally, at a level where I thought I kind of compared it to being back at Hamilton's level again.
Yeah.
Not where I wanted to be.
Yeah.
And I thought, so maybe unconsciously I had kind of lost my drive to an extent.
Yeah.
Lost the drive to get to the top.
And see then, Paul, were you, as you say, like you weren't necessarily conscious of feeling like that, but other than the likes of Angela, were you sort of, was there any, maybe for yourself or for the rest of the players, to each other, but were you able to discuss how you were feeling? Are you just trying to handle and cope with it? Do you think it would have been easier or to draw clarity if you'd maybe been able to? I mean, I know agents play a far greater role in players' careers and in their playing lives these days, but do you think at that time, if you'd been able to converse with somebody how you were feeling, or had somebody for an outward look been able to look in at how you were playing and how the situation was, you'd have been able to maybe sort of snap out of that quicker or adjust it at the time?
Aye, yeah. Again, in hindsight, it's something that you just try to deal with personally and go on with it. Yeah. Probably if I had a closer relationship to an agent, for example, then it may well have been of some comfort to talk to them about the situation.
Yeah.
But not to say that would happen. You're just another client along the lines of the rest of the clients, type thing. And probably the agent would have been the last person who I would have really spoken to in regards to anything personal, injuries, how I'm feeling, anything like that. So from a personal level, I'm quite inward in that respect. Yeah.
Do you think that's changed today, Paul? Do you think if a young player was going through that, what you were going through at that time, would the agent be more likely to lend a genuine ear? I'm not, because it's difficult, and I can appreciate from agents' point of view, they've got a job to do. So, you could maybe have an agent in that situation saying, oh, listen, I'll get you another club. And all of a sudden there's greater unsettlement. But you would need an agent you could trust that say, listen, wait a second, you've just came here, you had an injury, let's settle down and put a good year's worth of graft in and see where it takes you.
No, I think you're right. I think now it would be different. I think now it would be different. At that time, I never even had an agent to do my deal going to Brighton. I done the deal. I negotiated everything myself in that regard. Again, in hindsight, should I have sought advice from the agent who I had previously? Probably.
But and again, likewise, if it'd been offered at the same time, rather than, having spoken to other players whose careers have came at a different time. One said to me the other day, that was all my agent's responsibility. He said, sometimes to an extent, I passed too much on, but I just passed it on. So there is part of the reason I'm asking you the question, because I can see actually having, as I'm going through this process, interviewing players at different stages of their careers, you can actually see completely different responses to the same situation, because the game has changed and how the situation's being managed has changed.
Yeah.
And so I think when you look at that stage of your career and that timing in football, it was very much a stage at that point. Players just tried to go on with themselves like you would if you were a plumber, welder, joiner, But obviously, when you're a plumber, welder, or joiner, you're not doing it in front of 20 or 30,000 or 60,000 people every week. So it's a completely different situation, Paul, and it's very easy to feel isolated. That you're away from home. That's a common thing these days, but you're not in. You are away from home, so you're not in your own environment, and you're sort of. It'd be amazing. I would imagine the advice you're able to hand on to the young players that you take charge of now, and obviously we've mentioned Oliver, your own son, that, and I think it's the crux of what this is about, what I'm trying to achieve here. That players and coaches now, such as yourself, the advice that you're able to pass on as a result of the experiences is phenomenal. And I know with your own humility, you might not necessarily immediately be aware of that, but it is, Paul, what you're able to contribute to an player's career, because that isolation and feeling in an island there in a foreign area, you've just moved to the club, having not had the greatest set of circumstances. I'm not saying that about Southampton itself, but the way that it panned out, because that's how life can be sometimes. And then all of a sudden you go there, and again, interesting, you're taught, but you don't always realise, as an observer of football, as a fan of football, just how vital the impact to a club, the fans out with the ground protests and stuff, was obviously having on a club like Brighton. And you look at the success Brighton's having today and what a great club Brighton are, very similar to Southampton, and clubs like Portsmouth that have now probably in the position Brighton were in then.
Yeah.
They really need the support of the fans. It's crucial for success.
For probably Jimmy's last period in charge at Brighton would have been the toughest that Brighton Football Club and their supporters would have ever went through. I think the crowds were down at like 2,000, 2,500, and there was protests every game. There was walkouts every game. There was pitch invasions every game. There was I'm sure we may well get deducted points at one point. When it came to Christmas, towards the last part of the season, I think the fans realised that we're in trouble here. We could go out of the league. Yeah. We're sitting bottom of the league, I think. We were 12 points adrift at the bottom of the league, and Steve Gritt had just taken over as manager, and we played Hull City in the first game at the Goldstone, and I think the crowd was reasonable, maybe 5,500, 6,000 or so, and I had scored in the first game. I scored Steve Gritt's first goal, a header actually, and we win the game. And from that game till the very end of the season, we never lost at home, and the crowd and the momentum just carried on, and the real Brighton Football Club really came to the fore.
Yeah,
the support the fans gave thereafter in the build up towards the end of the season in terms of saving the club's or securing the club's place within the Football League was phenomenal. And playing at the Goldstone every week thereafter was like a special experience. And that's when I really get the benefit of playing in England at that time. Was the last 6 months of that season was phenomenal.
And that key word you said there, Paul, momentum. Momentum's everything in football.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Whether it's teams, fans, players, whatever, the togetherness, that was created when Steve came in, when Steve Gritt came in, the connection that was re-established with the supporters, that created the momentum to get us to make up the 12 points that we were behind, and to try and we couldn't win a game away from home.
Yeah.
So we had to ensure that every game we played at the Goldstone, we had to win the game.
6 pointers every week.
And the atmosphere at the games was increasing week by week by week. Up to the second last game, which was the last game ever to be played at the Goldstone, was the second last game of the season, and we come off the bottom of the league that day.
Brilliant.
For the first time in 9 months or so.
What the hell? And then survived the last game of the season.
survived the last game of the season with a 1 each draw at Hereford.
That's brilliant. And then, so how long did you stay after that, Paul, at Brighton?
I had the first season I signed for Brighton. I had half a season. Then I had a full season, and then I had half a season. So I had like 3 seasons.
Yeah.
But split into 2 years.
Yeah.
So it was the Christmas of the next season.
Yeah.
We were still travelling to Gillingham to play our home games, which was a 270-mile round trip.
Impossible.
And the crowds were relatively poor. The standard that we were playing at was poor. And I was becoming a wee bit, what would I say, disenchanted by it.
Yeah.
And took an opportunity to come back home again.
Yeah.
In hindsight, again, Steve Gritt came to me. He says, "Listen, I want you to stay. There's a contract there for you. You've still got a part to play in the club."
Yeah.
But I just didn't feel it. We felt detached because we were away from the Goldstone with the buzz of the Goldstone, and we were playing at Gillingham, which was.
It's tough, that part, because as you said again there, which is crucial, that engagement between the fans and the club, and having a home, even having home advantage, especially when you've at that particular time found it so tough away from home, but it's got to feel like your home.
Yeah.
But even if it's 6 miles down the road or 10 miles down the road, it still is within the environment. But to be travelling to Gillingham must have made it virtually impossible for the fans or the team to create that.
It's no coincidence that when they moved back to Brighton and back to the Withdean Stadium, albeit temporarily, that they started to get success and they get promotion through the leagues. So I think the connection with the supporters at your football club is massive.
Yeah. Especially in the environments where, like Brighton and Southampton, like Hamilton, Motherwell, as much as they're in close proximity, it is just at a local club. And so when people have been brought up in that area supporting that team, they've not got anybody else to support. It's not somebody that's in the centre of London and maybe having, one kid's brought up supporting Arsenal, and one's brought up supporting Tottenham or whatever, and you're in. When you've been brought up in an environment like Brighton and you support Brighton, and that's your team. Yeah. And then when that's took away, it must have been really difficult for the fans. So the engagement between yourselves and the fans, it can only really be with that special relationship when they've got a team to turn up on a Saturday and support themselves. So you can appreciate how tough that must have been. And then so you went and you returned home, so back to Scotland. And
I came back to Scotland. I had a couple of offers. I subsequently signed for Dunfermline. It was Dick Campbell and Bert Payton who were the management. Bert was manager. And again, I had very little knowledge of how Dunfermline had been. I'd kind of lost contact with what was really happening in Scotland in terms of players, etc. And I joined Dunfermline, who had some good players. Some good players that played in it. And it never occurred to me to think, right, you're going to Dunfermline. You've got so-and-so that's already at the club who's played 100 games for the club. You've got someone else who's also played so many games for the club who's in that area of the pitch as well. It didn't occur to me to actually do my homework in terms of where I would fit in going to Dunfermline. The guys like David Bingham, and Bingham was a brilliant player, really talented footballer. Lads like Stuart Petrie, who all played in my side of the pitch.
Yeah.
So in hindsight, I would ask the question, why did they take me to Dunfermline?
Yeah.
And I also ask the question, then, was it the right move for me to go to Dunfermline?
And again, in the modern day, they're all questions that would be out the hands of the average player anyway, wouldn't they? I mean, nowadays, it's not even something that a player might. But for instance, if that move was to France, as a player, it could be assumed that you should have known or done your homework because it was Scotland and it was your home country. But in actual fact, you're playing out the country for that long. That's a mistake at that time, or certainly not a mistake, but that's a thing that could have occurred to any player in the same shoes. But nowadays you would far less expect it to happen because the player would have somebody about him who should be doing that work.
Absolutely. And if you do your due diligence, you say, well, wait a minute, they've got 3 left-sided players there just now. Most of these guys have been playing semi-regularly between them. And I'm coming in as an
outsider,
30-year-old winger.
Yeah.
So even that in itself tells you something, that you're not going to be the 21-year-old player that's playing against Bert and Dick's team when you come to play for their team.
Aye, absolutely.
But as I say, I had quite an unhappy time at Dunfermline. I made my debut against Hibs at Easter Road. I think we lost 1-0. Played the full game, and I don't think I started another game.
Long did you stay there, Paul?
I was there for almost a year. 10 months. 10 months, and I completely disillusioned by the game. Completely disillusioned.
And again, through that, did you feel sort of, out with the likes of your own mate like Angela and your own family, but did you feel then sort of on your own a wee bit as far as what do I do next? And
well, it's funny when you say isolated and on your own. I'm quite a people person, so I wouldn't feel alone because I would be surrounded with teammates or pals who I had good rapport with.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't class me feeling isolated or alone because I would still be part of the group.
Yeah.
I would be feeling more frustrated than anything else. It was frustration rather than isolation. In fairness, it would be, and I would take my frustration out on the management.
Aye.
And I wouldn't be difficult, but I could be difficult then to deal with on the training pitch. I could be moody on the training pitch if I felt as though I wasn't being treated fairly.
Aye. And I think that's fair to most players, and certainly, the sort of type of player that is expressive and a winger or a creative player, a creative-minded person, I think, in any other profession as well. I think that frustration is you look at the likes of Jimmy Johnson, you look at Best, you look at Gaza, and you look at a lot of players that are all creative players. It's part of the charm that goes with a creative player. I think that's fair to say. And most players you think of, that is part of their personality. So I think that frustration, as you said, you go back to the moment in Southampton saying, "Oh, hallelujah." But I think anybody would have felt the same. And I think if you're prepared to express yourself, because I know you're not an argumentative type of person, so it is sheer frustration that eventually what comes out is the worst thought in your heart, and so then, Paul, what sort of, as you say about that stage and age of your career, what happened next?
By that stage, again, as I said, I'm becoming disillusioned at Dunfermline. I think I need to seek a new challenge. Again, I'm going almost a year again without playing first team football.
Yeah.
I've had 3 years without it at Southampton. Then I've had a wee spell at Brighton where I'm a regular player. Then I go to Dunfermline and I'm not playing first team football again. So you're taking 4 years out of your career there where you're not actually performing on the pitch where you want to be.
Yeah.
So at that time, I had agreed to leave Dunfermline. And I got asked to come into Partick Thistle.
Yeah.
So I came in and played a couple of trial games with Tommy Bryce was manager at the time, and I agreed to sign with Tommy until the end of that season. And we started the season off really well. I think we were top of the league, and by the end of that season, we almost get relegated again. John Lambie had then come back in by then. For his next miracle that he was going to produce, and at the end of that season, I left Thistle and joined Morton for 2 years. So John Lambie kind of started my career at Hamilton and finished it at Partick when he came back in.
Bloody hell.
Sorry. Yes. I'm on a Zoom. It's fine, you've just cut in. Commercial department, Tommy, you can't get the staff these days.
Brilliant.
But I try to get into your boardroom. Sorry, mate. Sorry.
Oh, you're fine. That's all right. Go for it, Paul. So I on to Morton.
So down to Morton, Billy Stark's manager, Frank Connor's assistant manager. I had played under Starkey when he was assistant manager at Hamilton, albeit it was pre-cruciate ligament, and I was 24 at the time. So when I went to Morton, I was 32. I was 31, 32. So my game would obviously be slightly modified at that time. So I wouldn't be the winger that could be flying past. And I think that was a frustration for Starkey.
Yeah.
And again, I kind of featured occasionally for him. And then he left and Ian McCall came in. And as soon as Ian McCall came in, my form kind of turned on its head, and he'll probably say it wasn't that great. I'll say it was better than it had been. Yeah. So enjoyed the rest of the season under him. And then it became a bit of a car crash, to be fair, at Morton, in terms of, again, you get disharmony within the club, takeovers, owners that the fans are protesting against, loads of different things happening. The club went into administration. I had a year left in my contract. I had to then leave the club with no recompense at all. And ended up back at Hamilton, where I started my career.
Shows you the impact, Paul, that all the off the field sort of incidents and goings on actually has on a player's career. You know, I mean, you look nowadays at the age you were then, you'd still have, by absolute interest, I said to you, you know, there's another player who I've actually done an interview this week. We talked about a real highlight his career, going to a club at the very same age you've just mentioned. And it was probably, for all the big clubs that he played for, it was the biggest. And he was exactly the same age. And you can see that by the absolute sort of stage of football in itself that you played in, not just the stage of your career, but actually the generation of football you played in, how you could see a player's career was, you know, I can even tell by your tone and how you're talking about the moves and how the moves happened. It's almost telling its own story. Your career was winding down to an end. And actually that other player said to me about that stage and age of his career, when he made that move, you know, the size of club, and he said the manager said to me, you know, I wouldn't necessarily start every game. And I said, did you think it was your age or the stage of your career? And he said, well, I was only, and he was the same age that you're reflecting on now. And he actually kind of said to me as if, like, what do you mean, you know? Mm-hmm. And I think it was a generation of football thing. And actually, it's amazing how that has played its part in your career at that stage. And that, again, is something else that happened to you in your career that was completely with your control. And it would be even more so now. You wouldn't be ready to stop playing at that age you were at now if you were playing today. I don't think.
It's not actually until you sit and as I've done today with yourself, and reflect on every stage that you've gone through in your career. And the overriding feeling I have here is it was such an underwhelming career in some aspects that I underachieved for where I probably should have got to.
Yeah.
But circumstances sometimes allow that, sometimes create.
You've just took the word I was going to say, actually, because It's funny because obviously we grew up together, Paul, right? And I'm just saying this clearly. Obviously, we're recording, and whether edit it or otherwise, when I actually reflect on your career and how I saw it, and how I still reflect on your career and I reflect on you, is that the contribution you made to making so many people happy in football, and obviously how as being slightly younger than you, and slightly younger, I'm not talking about, we're only a couple of years apart, but when I think I remember the likes of you and Fergie at Hamilton, and then obviously you get the move to Southampton, and obviously, over the years I was friendly with both you and Angela, and I look at your career, to me it's like it's a way up there, and I think you were one of the boys that made it. And so when you look at the circumstances that in actual fact, I didn't realise just how impactful on your career the sort of that disengaged, a sort of separation between the fans at clubs you were at, no you, but at clubs you were at. It really made me aware of just how impactful fans are at a club. And the next time I see any club on the telly where you see, you've seen the fans protesting at Celtic only 18 months ago, and then, the likes of Ange Postecoglou getting appointed, people saying, who is he? And he knows that. He's commenting himself, and obviously he's been on to have great success so far there. But it's amazing, actually, just how that disharmony at a club, away from the 100 yards of green grass, it really impacts the players far greater than I think anybody ever realises, and certainly than I ever realised. In this interview, I think will go a long way to shaping that. One of the things I've said to you before, and we've spoken about football, obviously my own son, I talked to you about our Maddox and your Oliver, and I'm sitting here thinking, for all the challenges they'll face, it will be incredible. And I would imagine for Oliver, as your own son, to be able to sit and say, God, my dad didn't get it easy. And I think for any young player, that's a lot of what this is about. You played with Mark Letitia and came through, and just circumstances, a nothing injury, what appeared to be a nothing injury in the back of your knee, would have been diagnosed today in 2 minutes. You wouldn't have played another minute to that had healed. Because you continued to play, the damage became a real injury, kept you out for a year of a 2-year deal. So you're getting a 50% window to prove yourself, and you've got to come back for a cruciate, and the manager's changed. And the manager changed again. And you look at all these things, Paul, and it's amazing just the impact that has on just how your career could be shaped, And I think for the talent that you had and for what you contributed to football, the impact you had in Scottish football, and that, I remember you at Hamilton beating Rangers 1-0, and was it the Scottish Cup or the league?
I didn't. The Scottish Cup, I didn't actually play that. I was an apprentice that game.
But you look at you were, for any sort of football fan around, that was such a major deal for Hamilton to beat Rangers, and you were in there, you were in at that club. I think that you achieved an awful lot more as part of Hamilton than in part of football in general. But I think it's amazing, actually, the impact of off-field events and managers changing, all these different things had in your career. That was beyond your circumstances, and yet here you are now as a coach, still in football, still making your living out of football, and you have never, your enthusiasm when I've spoke to you when you were at Kilmarnock as a coach, and now at Partick Thistle, has never been dented, which I think is testament to who you are, and also what you're able to contribute back to young players because of the sometimes roller coaster experience you've had in the game.
I think the modern day opinion is that all good football managers and coaches don't have to have played at a senior level. I think there's something in the fact that if you are a manager and you have played at a senior level, or a coach and you played at a senior level, you have experiences that you can tap into that these other coaches, albeit are all fully qualified and knowledgeable, just don't have and are unable to tap into.
I think right. Sorry, Paul.
Experience. No, sorry.
No, yeah, but I think that's it. I think it's you can't buy experience. If you're sitting down and talking to a player that you're coaching in a minute and sharing what we've shared, I think if the players that you've coached watch this video and get the opportunity to see what you went through as a player yourself, I think the respect level for just how much you handled would be tenfold, knowing what you went through, because everybody that's got a love for football only sees what they love. They don't want to see the bits they hate.
Yeah.
You know?
And I think if you, again, when you look back and you see that your career's blighted by certain circumstances, and I think back and if somebody said to me, would you do that again? I would say, aye, absolutely.
Yeah, it's a crazy. Paul, honest to God, obviously we've been pals a long time. It's been an absolute pleasure to interview. Sorry I've kept you so long.
No, you're fine.
If we can put it down to your work, but it's been a joy speaking to you and listening to you. And thanks for the bottom of my heart for your time.
Always a pleasure to catch up with you, pal.
Thanks for watching the latest episode of Making It Pro. Remember to like, subscribe, and leave a comment below. Look forward to sharing the next episode soon.